Quo Vadis AfSA? Where is the African Moonlander? By Anton Komarev. On the 1st August 2023, the International Outsider flagship article was titled AfSA, the African Space Agency, in which we retraced the story of space ventures on the African continent. We introduced our readers to the creation of a freshly born African space agency, while enumerating the numerous challenges that the continent will have to face if it aspires to be a serious player and considered as such in the field of space technology and exploration. We said then that times were changing and urged the necessity of moving quickly in implementing basics as well as clear policies which will allow the continent to catch up with the other space powers of the planet. We also lamented in the course of our article that despite already functional for few months, the African Space Agency did not have a website, and even crime among all for such an organization, it did not sport a logo. To our discontent, we learned that AfSA was not in the business of building rockets or satellites. Considering that state of affairs, we proposed that AfSA should be a public relation powerhouse emulating what NASA does for its marketing, considering all proportions of course. If AfSA was not here to implement space programs of its own, at the very least it could become the ultimate space exploration propaganda outlet on the African continent. As we all learn as human beings, a great journey starts with small steps. That is why those tools, website and logo were primordial to achieve what AfSA intends to be, nothing less than an indispensable influencer and unifier of the politics of the different African space agencies. To illustrate our point of view, we portrayed how the NASA logo was known worldwide among the lander personae compared to the logos of the other space agencies, which are automatically recognized only by the professionals, space cadets or nerds. That is exactly why we wrote back in 2023 that an effective public relations department would campaign, and why not invite the youth and the talented people of Africa to design a logo as part of the competition. As it came to be, we have finally been granted a website and positive news for a logo which we all hope will adequately represent the ambitions of Africa in space. Before speaking about space exploration and what the title of this article would have led the reader to long for, let's explore the website of AfSA and let us see how it compares with the other heavyweights of the industry. Who is Server? A site which allows you to inquire about the origins and ownership of any website on the World Wide Web, tells us that the website of AfSA was registered on the name africanspaceagency.org on October 27, 2024, which in itself implies on what date the domain name went live on the internet. It does not, however, mean that on this day there was an effective AfSA website. But to all intents and purposes, we can consider this date as the birthday of AfSA on the web. Who is does not tell us much more, and it is quite fair to say that who is gives the approximate same details when it comes to other space agencies, whether it is the Indian, Chinese, Russian, American or European ones. As a matter of fact, it would not be fair to run comparative ratings of AfSA against its competitors through the many search engine optimizer tools of the Internet, due to the young age of the organization. Even so, such an exercise could reveal to us flaws that would not be necessarily evident by simply browsing the site. We will not be pedantic for this time, leaving the site to mature sufficiently before again attempting the experiment in 1 year or two. We want to say straightforwardly that in few aspects, astonishingly, the AfSA website is actually better than some of its well-established counterparts. We will, however, be very critical, as better in few aspects is unfortunately insufficient, knowing that AfSA must excel in marketing and public relations. Understandably, as we pointed earlier, we do not expect AfSA's website to score very much through SEO tools. It still remains that there are certain basics that have to be met. From South Africa, searching the word AfSA or AfSA through the Bing engine of Microsoft does not give any relevant results on the space agency, until the 4th page where we abandon the search. AfSA.org does not give better results. Using Google does not lead either to the agency despite changing your location or using a VPN. To effectively reach the site, one must painstakingly type the words African Space Agency. Imagine typing National Aeronautics and Space Administration each time you want to reach NASA's website. For instance, one has only to write ISRO in any search engine to have a flurry of information about the Indian Space Research Organization, and that stands for most of the many space agencies of the planet. This is indeed very troubling, as at the International Outsider, one of the means of financing our activities is the design and management of websites, and if it is undoubtedly notoriously very difficult to ensure immediate recognition of a new website on the first pages, there are however some tricks that can be applied and which function pretty well, at least at a regional level. And we have to bear in mind that we are speaking about an official organization with continental ambition supported by not less than 50 African countries. We have been stunned while investigating on the subject to see that domain name AfSA.com could still be acquired, albeit with some negotiations. The domain afsa.org is definitively taken, but afsa.net is still available. This is a gross mistake for several reasons. If the price tag on afsa.net can be considered as excessive for a medium-sized business, it should not, however, be in any way a cause of budgetary concern for an organization like AfSA. As for the domain afsa.tv, the price is so ridiculously low that it is almost a sin not to grab it in prevision of the future. The webmaster or administrator of AfSA could use these sites to redirect towards their main site. They could also just hold these domains without effectively operating them, because not doing so can also be very dangerous. A moderately competent IT administrator could even find clever ways to use these domains to optimize the results of the main site on the web. There are other issues that can arise from letting these domains remain available on the market. Some unscrupulous actors could buy them and wait for the moment that the purchase of these domains become of major importance to the African Space Agency, then sell or rent it to them at an overinflated price. Not very moral, you may argue, but absolutely legal. Something similar happened to us at the beginning of 2024. The International Outsider lost ownership of interouts.com due to the unfortunate loss of documents during reorganization. The unscrupulous actor in our case was the company GoDaddy, which bought the site and attempted to sell it at a whopping 54,000 South African rand, or some $2,963. Fortunately for us, we are also in the business, which alternatively makes our mistake totally unacceptable, and at the end of the day, we have been able to mitigate the many negative effects that could have affected us with the interouts.com site not controlled by our company on the internet. Ultimately, these unfortunate events made much positive free advertising for our newspaper, which found its value tripled in a matter of days. It was, however, a long run and a very unpleasant experience that we wished to no one, even less to the African Space Agency. And this sort of situation is far from being the worst that can happen. Another actor, a fraudulent one this time, may acquire these domains and design sites pretending to be associated to the African Space Agency, if not squarely cloning the website, resulting in scamming an unsuspecting public. It would be irresponsible for the agency not to consider the state of affairs as a matter of concern. The situation is even more complicated for AfSA, as it seems that they do not hold the ownership of AfricanSpaceAgency.com. This honor comes to the usual suspect GoDaddy, who, of course, is willing to let it go for an astronomical price. AfricanSpaceAgency.net and AfricanSpaceAgency.tv are not anymore available, taken hopefully by AfSA. The website itself is visually pleasant, with header and drop-down covering several subjects and departments. We are then conveyed to a slideshow of 3 images. The first one depicts the premises of the agency in Cairo. We have to admit, and we wrote in the past, that locating the space agency in Egypt was an excellent choice. Not only because Egypt, an ancient civilization thousands of years old, was religiously and culturally resolutely fascinated by the night sky, but also in these modern times, the space agency can play a role of unification between the Maghreb and the other countries of the continent. A relation who has not been in the past, as we know, as straightforward as one could have wished. The slideshow is unfortunately not interactive, so the user is unable to stop it at will, making it difficult to read the accompanying caption in one shot. Tweaking the timer or making the slide interactive would do the trick. The second picture portrays 5 beautiful and rather young people, with 3 females in the center of the image and the males on both sides. Behind them are clocks with different time zones: Tokyo, Los Angeles, Sydney, etc. The caption reads, "Jobs at the African Space Agency." We have multiple issues with this picture. Either the photography was a result of a photo shoot, habitually expensive, or less probably acquired through stock footage. The intended message is quite clear: working for AfSA in the space industry is modern, appealing and dynamic. No one tells us who are these people. Are they working for AfSA? Technicians? Aspiring or working in the space industry? This picture would find a better place in Vogue magazine rather than occupying such a massive proportion of the space agency website. Some people may push back on us, arguing that it is only a marketing trick, a technique targeted at the youth, and that we should not make a mountain out of it. But there is strictly nothing in this image which speaks about space, showcasing much more how one should be dressed for office work. We would have rather seen some youth interacting with those working in the space industry or anything that relates to the subject. The third picture makes more sense, with a satellite, hopefully an African one, orbiting over Africa carrying the caption, "Unifying Africa's Space Ambitions." While hovering over the slide, the user is able to choose if he or she wants to view the site in Arabic, French, and Portuguese, with the default being in English. Our question is, where is the translation of the website in Swahili? Obviously, the site could not be translated in all spoken languages of the continent, but Swahili is spoken by 100 million East Africans and is the 4th most spoken language of the continent, while Portuguese does not even make the list of the 15 most spoken languages in Africa. There are other problems through the whole site, notably the centering of pictures which sometimes overlap the text. The gallery, a visual must, who said that a picture can say more than 1,000 words, is poorly populated. Why not including pictures of the many birds that several African countries have to this date launched into orbit? Why not pictures of sites, radio telescopes and observatories that are spread out across the many nations of Africa? Another technical issue worthy of noting is that on a PC or any large display, the search button is mingled with the link to the contact page, which can be confusing for many users, and as this defect is found on the header of every page, it certainly messes up with the visual and fluidity of the site. The problem does not, however, plague mobile phones or tablets users. Despite the disturbing effect that these problems cause to the site, they are, however, minor technical or design problems and can easily be fixed. But why did we write that in few aspects AfSA's website is revealed to be better than some heavyweights in the industry? To rapidly access to the main space agencies, we made use of the astronomy toolbar for personal computers that we published few years ago on the internet in our effort to disseminate space exploration and related subjects in Southern Africa. Some self-promotion is necessary here. Using the site, one can rapidly access NASA, Roscosmos, the CNSA, ESA, ISRO and JAXA, which are respectively the United States, Russian, Chinese, European, Indian and Japanese space agencies. The 3 best sites according to us are those of NASA, ISRO and ESA in the order that only personal taste will dictate. We acknowledge that our judgment is unfair to the Chinese Space Agency, CNSA, whose website is a festival of images and information. These websites are rich in visual imagery, are interactive and contain far less boring pictures of official and politicians in suits, which plague the whole AfSA site. Can the Public Relations Department of the African Agency understand that there should be an awful lot regarding space on a space agency website? It would be a healthier approach rather than forcing the public to ingest pictures of seemingly interested, well-dressed people, most probably more concerned by the cocktail following the venue. In other terms, yes, we want to see suits, not Jogo Armani fashionable tailor-made ones, but good old-fashioned space suits. An example that could be useful to the PR of AfSA, to call for the ESA graduate trainee program, and to attract the youth in general. The European Space Agency uses imagery focusing on the instrumentation and environment where the space cadet will evolve. They use panoply of cosmic images which triggers dream and wonder. Granted, It is undeniably marketing tricks, but it is also images that appeals to the space enthusiast, to the artist, and to the public. Pictures inviting to dream, a stark contrast with the AfSA youth-related picture which conveys more to an invitation to a nightclub. AfSA's website however stands its ground ratings, being a better site than Roscosmos or JAXA. We based our opinion in this case more on the visual rather than the content. All in all, it is not that bad for a very young site. It remains that there is still much more to be done. Before speaking about hardcore space technology and programs, let us spend some time on what the vexing issue of the logo was. While assessing the website, we discovered that the African Space Agency had done exactly what we proposed in 2023. A competition was organized open to all the creative youth of Africa aged from 18 to 29. Did the agency get somehow inspired by our article? Certainly not, as this kind of incentive should be automatically envisaged by any public relation officer without provoking a cerebral stroke. We learned that there were 143 candidates for 113 unique participations covering 19 African countries, and that the winner of the competition was the 22-year-old Cameroonian Remy Fadhil Bouhele. Stop a minute. Let's rewind that, should we? 113 participations covering 19 African countries. Meaning an average of 5.4 participants per country. More concerning, the contest failed to represent even half of the countries of the continent. What kind of public relations effort has been done to inform those concerned about this competition and the general African public as a whole? Has the memo been properly circulated among the science and education ministries of the member states? If everything has been done to disseminate the information, the then result of 113 participations is a deplorable one and does not give us a lot of hope about the interest of the African youth in space, an idea that we will certainly not adhere to, otherwise we would not have engaged in the business of promoting this sector. Considering the number of schools and institutions dispersed on the continent, taking into account the numerous astronomy clubs, amateur rocket enthusiasts existing in the Republic of South Africa alone, this makes such a situation risible on a continent inhabited by 1 billion souls. As a matter of fact, why was the competition so restricted in the age range of the participants? Why not a section open to younger participants? If one of AfSA's aims is to attract the youth, then they might be interested to know that generally the passion of a space cadet arises at a very young age. Most space agencies understand that, and teenagers are often targeted by them, as proven by the many campaigns aimed at the youth. One can legitimately ask the question, what part of the budget allocated to the competition was spent on the jury meetings to legitimately deliberate about the winner? How much money was spent on the trip of the winner from Cameroon to Cairo? Finally, what was the cost of the award-winning ceremony itself? All those expenditures should then be compared to the amount of money spent on promoting the competition itself, and the results should be telling. What about the logo itself? Is it possible that the insignificant number of participants is only the reflection of the outstanding quality of the submissions? Mr. Bouhele, the winner of the competition, is another young beautiful person. Reading about his biography, we learn that the 22-year-old man holds a degree in software engineering, that he is a passionate graphic designer, and that the young man is blessed with the ability to transform ideas into visually stunning experiences. And if that was not sufficiently impressive, the man is said to have a keen eye for detail and is driven by his love of creativity. The Cameroonian national specializes in branding, digital illustration and web design. The bio continues decrypting the winner of the competition as someone who believes that design should inspire and connect, and that he embraces challenges as opportunities for innovation. Furthermore, we are told that the young African work illustrates an artistic flair and a deep understanding of the audience needs. Finally, Mr. Bouhele makes of each project a unique narrative as he strives to leave a lasting impact in the design world. The public is also gracefully informed that the agency has presented him an award for his outstanding design contribution. Wow! Let's say straight, when anyone waxes lyrical at this level of intensity, it can only mean one of two things. First, you really got the real deal, and you are very proud to announce it and parade it to the world. Or two, you are desperate to make everyone think that you are indeed in possession of the true stuff. Because let's be real, and now, we want to insist that this work is an article of opinion, and our appreciation of the logo must also be taken as such. The logo is nice without being special and fails in some respects to deliver the message. First, the African continent will not necessarily be taken for the letter F, as it is intended to be as per the design of the logo, by an unaware public, making uncertain that people will get this subtle touch at all, and ultimately properly read the acronym. A tiny rocket is supposed to illustrate the connection of the logo to space, an intention which it does not necessarily achieve in an era where so many fast food delivery services sport a rocket of some kind. It is also unclear to us what are the ripples at the base of the logo. One could hope that this intend to represent gravitational waves, thus connecting the radio astronomical assets of the continent, but somehow, we doubt it. Someone at AfSA foresaw the problems working with an acronym so widely in use. This person decided to contravene the potential issues by writing the acronym AfSA in uppercase except for the letter F. This was actually a correct approach, and it seems that it is the policy adopted by the agency. Despite his so-called keen eye, Mr. Buhele completely missed that detail. Including the full written acronym on the logo would facilitate the identification of the agency and eliminate confusion between the other AfSAs on the market. When in 2023 we published our article on the African agency, we asked our designer to rapidly put together a logo in the aim of illustrating our arguments. Like Mr. Buhele, he too thinks that a logo should carry a powerful narrative. His was a pyramidal structure connecting the ancient Egyptian mythology to the agency. He included the full name of the agency as well as its favored acronym. The connection to space is further emphasized by the triangular shape dear to many space agencies, as appearing recurrently on their logo, even used in TV shows like Star Trek. Of course, one does not have to follow the trend, but sometimes it helps in avoiding confusion. And no, without ignoring the talent of Mr. Buhele, we do not see there a deep understanding of the audience needs and even less a visually stunning experience. Once again, it is only our own opinion and those of the few people to whom we expose the situation. Let's be one and foremost very clear that our aim is not sensationalism, and we would have been very mean if our intention was to disgrace a young man whose guilt was only to participate and win a competition. But would have it not been more modest and closer to the truth to imply that Mr. Buhele is a talented young man, thank him for participating, praise his efforts and wish that his example would be followed by legions more? Instead, we got exaggerated and inflated praises, as if the young man was able to produce a logo of the level of Coca-Cola or NASA every morning before breakfast. The question is, who authorized such a bombastic bio to be published on the site? Was it provided by Mr. Buhele, or has it been written by the PR of the agency? We think we have the answer to this question, and we will come back on that in the conclusion of this article. But at least we got a logo which is better than not having one at all. Let's hope that as a web designer and a content creator, Mr. Buhele would not have left before giving some much needed professional advice to the IT team of AfSA. The title of this article speaks about a moonlander. Was it clickbait? Those who are already used to these pages know that we do not engage in these kinds of activities. Originally, our intention was to build a roadmap for the construction of an African space probe, involving a wide range of cooperation across Africa. Knowing that AfSA would not raise the financing, we thought about proposing the initiation of a task force consisting of African research institutes and universities. AfSA, though initiating the project, could maintain strictly a consultative role in the venture. However, the African agency would use its weight to liaise with the other space powers and find the ideal international partners. If money was the only hurdle, we intended to prove that the cost could be so radically brought down that it would drain minimal resources from the countries participating in the project. After assessing AfSA's website, we concluded that there were more immediate issues, but we definitively will tackle such a project in the near future. A few years ago, when we wrote about AfSA and its commitments, we argued that promoting outer space projects and programs was in no way contradictory to AfSA's charter. We even made it clear that it would be in the interest of AfSA to intentionally provoke, subtly or not, member states to engage in more ambitious programs. We spoke about space mining, lunar exploration and exploitation. Then as today, we passionately believe that Africa has a brilliant future in space and that a little bit of imagination would make us shine on the international level as well as positioning ourselves on the new wave of space exploitation. Unfortunately, there is no sign of the will to invest or promote lunar or outer solar system exploration on the website of AfSA. There is, so to say, no place for dreams and even less for bold undertakings. It is not as if the website is a blend of programs. For example, we are invited to understand the importance of Earth observation and grasp its critical role in managing resources and preventing disasters. A very interesting example is given decrypting how satellite surveys have predicted locust breeding grounds, thus allowing the authorities to take preventive action to save critical farmlands. Other examples including mapping, identification of water and oil drilling spots, deforestation tracking, pollution and environmental damage control, etc. are given. The user is also asked to consider the efforts of AfSA promoting and implementing navigation and positioning systems to ensure human safety and enhance road, air and sea travel security. There is not a lot to say here, except that these achievements, plans and programs are noble and amenable. However, those undertakings are a must, something that has to be done whether we like it or not. To quote the words of Dr. Tidian Huhatara, President of the Council of the African Space Agency, AfSA, space is no longer a luxury, it is a necessity. In the course of his intervention at the International Forum on Artificial Intelligence on the 20th of February 2025, Dr. Huhatara said that Africa will no longer be a consumer of space technologies and that the continent must become a producer. He is absolutely right, but there is nothing here to beat our chest for. Those are things that are only obvious undertakings that we should not leave others to do for us. On that day, Dr. Huhatara was echoing the same words spoken by the Indian Prime Minister Modi a few years ago. The contrast is the vigor with which India approaches the space industry compared to the baby steps of Africa. Dr. Huhatara is himself a professional who holds a master's degree in physical geography and a PhD in remote sensing and geographical information system. Dr. Huhatara has an impressive career and served as an advisor to the President of the Canadian Space Agency, but his main focus was Earth observation, navigation and positioning. Does that explain why the agency seems to be concentrated about promoting the development of these technologies? If anyone argues that AfSA at least sports a page of astronomy, which undeniably in itself must be considered as an effort at promoting space exploration, however, disturbingly there is only one line about studying the planets, exploring the universe or understanding physics. The rest is again focus on meteorology, geodesy, mapping and so on. If this article qualifies as an investigative one, we however mainly classified it in the opinion category, as our questions are the ones of the simple lander citizen of Africa. When we ask where is the African moon lander? It can be many things and not necessarily a robotic expedition to the moon. A rather simple scientific instrument built by African institutes and financed by African member states could piggyback on an outer space mission of one of the spacefaring nations. An astronomical observatory in orbit is also such a project. We are not speaking here about a JWST telescope, or even a Hubble Type 1, but an observatory responding to a need in the field, and which will attract legions of scientists from around the world asking for observation time. A valued time, which in return can be traded for other types of scientific cooperation. As we explained in 2023, countries like South Africa and Nigeria pursue their own programs in space. South Africa, which signed a cooperation with the BRICS partners for lunar exploitation and is actively cooperating with NASA in the communication arena to support the Artemis project. Nigeria on its side is also involved in the Artemis program, and their space agency do not hesitate to engage in groundbreaking missions and from time to time come with unexpected announcements, which gives hope that at least the will is here, to conquer space directly from the soil of our continent. Nigeria has also an ambitious vision of human space exploration, as we reported extensively in our last publication on African space. At the International Outsider, we are supportive fans of the Nigerian space programs and feel pride when the South African Space Agency pushes for a full program aimed to train South African astronauts. Speaking about the construction of the Ground Tracking Communication Center and Communication Facility of Matjiesfontein, which is aimed to support Artemis, and Disra Milsa, then interim CEO of SANSA, South African National Space Agency, ushered the words that we all need to hear in Africa. During an interview for DW, the interim CEO of SANSA said, we quote, "When it comes to space exploration beyond Earth observation and communications, especially going to another planets, Africa is being pulling behind in a way, or left behind in that kind of arena. With this ground station we are actually putting the word as that Africa is actually now starting to participate in lunar missions, and it does open up for science and R&D." End quote. What can we say to that? Simply bravo. It is not that the interim CEO did not have more urgent preoccupations. Before, in the same interview, she spoke about the immediate needs of the continent in terms of space technology. She was concerned quite rightly about the place of women in space exploration. Nevertheless, she had also in focus the wider range and implications of the whole technology. We are not throwing these words because it comes from a preeminent operative of a South African space organization. Mrs. Milsa was, by the way, born and raised in a rural village in Ghana, a village that she insists is still rural. Now that is the kind of story we want to hear. Maybe Mrs. Mlisa does not really correspond to the protocols of AfSA, as she was giving the said interview from a modest hotel room not far from the scorching hot location where the ground station was to be built. Are the operatives of AfSA doing even remotely the same thing, or do they write all their policies under the shadow of the multi-million-dollar air-conditioned building in Cairo? Earlier in the same interview, the viewer was invited to meet two young students passionate by space. The first one, a boy, Keegan Mani, describes how he is interested in, guess what? Rockets, engineering, going out of the solar system and exploring space. Another student, Lihima Bokwe, speaks about stars and the universe. To the thousands of Keegan and Lihima spread across the continent, AfSA and Dr. Huhatara can only answer what is almost now the motto of the agency. We do not build rockets nor satellites. Or if you have any fancy visions, go and seek work overseas. Despite all the luck we wish to any African nation venturing in space, the programs of the Nigerians, South Africans and others are, however, nation-building ones. The projects we would wish to see championed by AfSA have continental scope, Pan-Africanism at its best. They have the advantage to teach us to work together, to have a common ground control for logistic support, and to earn non-negligible goodwill on the international scene. As for more ambitious programs, a moon lander could be for now be out of reach, since such an endeavor is still a headache for seasoned space agencies. Asking a private company to deliver your instruments or robotic probe there does not either guarantee that you will not crash land on the moon's surface. If ever the agency was to target the planets, then Mars may be not the obvious choice. The red planet has been seduced by so many spacecrafts from different spacefaring nations that it would be hard to make more than a day in the international news if we were to go there. Where then? Why not Venus? Contrary to the red planet, Venus does not have a small flotilla of spacecraft in orbit. Although there are planned robotic explorers to the morning star, an African probe getting there will ensure the habitual scientific manner and a wide range of media coverage. Very often probes in orbit support each other's operations, which is another way to enforce cooperation with the major space powers. And we could be lucky. If Mars is a prime candidate in the search for life out of Earth's ecosystem, there is some suspicion that the clouds of Venus could harbor the grail of biological discoveries which has mounted since the visit of the first Soviet probes and later observation of its atmosphere. What an irony it would be if Africa in its first attempt to reach the planets is determining in the finding of life in the solar system. We will not speak about the price tag today, and quite frankly it has become quite a boring exercise to explain why space is important, and why the economic benefits can be tremendous. Surprisingly, among space advocates there are also those who are oblivious to both the scientific and economic advantages of deep space exploration. In one sense, those people are as blind and short-sighted as those who thought about artificial satellites only as scientific curiosity. For those who want to delve more in details in these matters, we advise two of our past articles, the African Space Agency and the Billionaire Space Race. Suffice is to say that the recent moon landings, or more properly, the recent attempts to land on the moon, are made on the cheap, as these missions carry a general cost of $60 to $80 million. India stunned the space community with a price tag of $75 million for their maiden mission to Mars. A mission to Venus can be mounted for less than that, and an African scientific instrument taking a ride on a conjoined mission at a fraction of this price. Does AfSA know how to implement or even promote a deep space exploration project which will call for the partnership of multiple nations and not contradict their beloved charter of not being too involved? Does AfSA even care? Has AfSA even considered the many ways to kill this cat? Let's dream a little bit. Will someone have the insight to make the heart of a whole continent beat by implementing a bold project? This bold project should be a rocket. Africa desperately needs its own orbital-capable booster. We expressed doubts in previous articles about listening to the main advisor of the African agency, which seems to be the Europeans, who are quite content to contain African ambitions in space at a low level. However, if there is a page to take from the European book, it is the system they put in place to build and launch their rocket of the Ariane family. It would be ideal for Africa to have several components of an indigenous continental-built rocket manufactured by different countries and then assembled and launched from an equatorial location on the continent. Some would see a nightmare of logistics. We see progress, opportunities, and development. This African type of launch's main aim would be to ultimately take over the African market for launching satellites, and that would be, if necessary, a long-term objective. Some will say that the agency is still in its infancy and more time is needed. But time is exactly the commodity that AfSA does not have. As of 2024, the African continent counted an amount of 61 satellites launched into space by 17 countries compared to the 10,000 objects launched by other countries, and it is a total debacle. When you are in such a situation, you do not need help, you need rescue. There is no time anymore for lengthy conferences or lavish cocktails. Some decisive action is desperately needed. Despite an excellent 4-part article of Kwakusuma in 2023, where he provided solid arguments against the need for an African space agency, we disagreed with him then, as we still think that the agency can still be the champion in advocating space ventures in Africa. We will end with yet another complaint on the communication abilities of the African Space Agency. We spoke previously about the bio of Mr. Buhele and would like to clarify the situation as we associate the issue with the communication problems of the agency. As a young man of 22 years old, probably new on the work market, Mr. Buhele must have learned, like most of us, that you have to sell your services in an environment of cutthroats. It belongs to him to advertise his person as he wishes, and if we would not have adopted his style, we have to admit that it does work on some occasions. Would he have been asked for a bio? One cannot condemn him if he has the highest opinion of his person. We think that the bio was provided by Mr. Buhele, as his homepage on LinkedIn carries almost the same words. It could be, of course, that we are wrong and that Mr. Buhele modified his bio in accordance with the communique of AfSA. The situation on the AfSA side is far the less unprofessional. After including the academic credentials of Mr. Buhele, the PR department should have gone carefully through the rest of the document before green-lighting it to be published. There is some basic logic to understand here. One may think that one is the best thing after sliced bread, but is it in the advantage of the agency to publish on its official website that the winner of our competition is effectively the best that anyone can hope for? If the bio was written by the PR of AfSA, then it beats any explanation that we are able to give, and we have no idea of how to put this person to a better use. We expressed our difficulty understanding the logo of Mr. Buhele, the main reason being that the communique of the agency never spoke to the public about the logo, instead being content to describe the magnificence of the winner. There would have been a simpler way to go with this affair. It would have sufficed to organize an interview of the winner, ask him what message he wanted to get through with the other niceties which go with this kind of exercise. It would have avoided the public to wonder and us to complain about at least half of the issues debated in this article, an exercise more painful for us than one could suspect. We are quite convinced that AfSA will not hear any of our propositions for promoting bold space ventures, but we would however strongly advise them to reorganize their communication departments at every level. What AfSA should do is also giving more attention to the social media. A channel on a platform like YouTube is more than needed. If not a channel, AfSA should at least post videos on a regular basis. There are multiple reasons for that. The overwhelming one is that it is more than an obvious public relation exercise. In one of the videos, the viewer could be invited to explore the agency, get familiar with its workings, and meet the operatives of AfSA, and why not a message of the highest authority of the agency which is also needed on the official website. There is also another not negligible advantage to publish some dedicated videos on the internet, not the main reason, but certainly not one to underestimate. AfSA should have its own informative medium capable of giving the point of view of the agency against people like us. AfSA could also close the fashion department, which seems to run the show and act as PR there. They should dress these beautiful young people it has on the site in a jumpsuit and send them to cover the launch of a South African test rocket in the desert. There is nothing like standing next to a moody rocket to get you a taste of space adventure. Nothing to worry about. Science has done stunning progress in solar screen confection, and there is nothing as glamorous as a picture in the shade of one of the radio telescopes of the square kilometer array. Our aim is not to make anyone laugh, on the contrary, it is the tears of missed and stolen opportunities that we want to shed. We have not decided to write such a hard-hitting article for some devious pleasure or criticism for the sole aim of criticizing. When the space probe New Horizons was threatened with the end of its planetary mission, we did not hesitate to rush into publishing an article in support of the space probe and its courageous team. We did that from our distant location, undeterred by the difficulties, because we strongly believe that the space community as a whole is nothing less than an international one, and that the benefits of exploration profit all mankind. In fact, the whole idea behind this article is to help improving the situation at AfSA. We tried to contact the agency, by mail and also by using their message box on the contact page. We never received an answer even when using different mail addresses. Why is that so? Why do we receive swift answers to our inquiries from more established and reputed space agencies? What makes AfSA so special? What makes its operatives so busy? That is why today we feel compelled to ask to AfSA, Vadis, where is the African moon lander?
No more carefree updates, silence ever after, walking through cardio west, tears in my laughter. Here's where the story ends, this is goodbye my friend. Logging in, logging off, circles that never bend. haunting every bite, trying to find the somehow, fading into night. Here is where the story ends. This is goodbye, my friend. Logging in, logging off, circles that never bend.
Ubuntu? I'm going to learn Ubuntu?
The international outsider has so far avoided carrying advertising or even a donation button, thus making sure our visitors are not disturbed by incessant intrusive adverts. We are fully self-financed, which does not mean that we do not feel the strain, even more so in today's rapidly approaching recessionary climate. We avoid as much as we can to ask for financial donations, so how can you help? Among our non-profit activities, we promote astronomy in Southern Africa. If you're on the continent and possess unused telescopes, binoculars, or any material associated to astronomy, we'd be glad to receive them so we can redistribute them to people in the field. Another of our activities is to introduce new software on older hardware. It allows us to increase the longevity of computers, thus helping people who cannot afford to renew their systems to stay competitive, which is extremely important in Africa. Like telescopes, we're happy to receive any computers the visitor has no use for anymore. The International Outsider distributes more than 95% of materials received by donation. One thing we need urgently is solar panels, inverters, batteries and generators due to the constant breakdown of electricity supply in South Africa, something which restricts our output and productivity immeasurably. If, however, you wish to financially assist us, please contact us via the main options available.